At 7 o'clock on March 30, 1945, Major General Maurice Rose sat in the lead jeep of Task Force Wellborn, south of Paderborn, Germany, scanning the forested road ahead where German armored units had been reported moving under the cover of darkness. He was 45, with 28 years in the army, the highest-ranking American officer leading from the front in Europe. Elements of the German 116th Panzer Division had deployed at least 4 Tiger tanks in the woods ahead, cutting off elements of the 3rd Armored Division. Rose had earned his reputation the hard way. 7 months earlier, in August 1944, he assumed command of the 3rd Armored Division during active combat in France after the previous commander was relieved. The division needed someone willing to push relentlessly through German defenses, and Rose was that man. Within weeks, his subordinates began describing him as aggressive, reckless, some even whispered, crazy. They said this because he refused to command from a safe distance. While other division commanders set up headquarters miles behind the lines, Rose positioned his command post within rifle range of German positions. He rode at the front of armored columns, crossed bridges alone with just his driver to ensure they were secure for his tanks. Corps Commander Lightning Joe Collins repeatedly urged him to pull back, but Rose ignored the warnings. The 3rd Armored had earned the nickname Spearhead for good reason. Under Rose's leadership, they became the tip of the First Army's advance across France and into Germany. On September 12, 1944, the division crossed the German border near Röcken. They were the first American armored unit to enter Nazi Germany, the first to breach the Siegfried Line, the massive concrete fortifications and dragon's teeth obstacles Hitler had boasted would halt the Allied advance. The cost was severe. By late September, the division had lost 41 Sherman tanks in just 3 weeks of fighting through the Siegfried defenses. Tank crews suffered casualties at rates that stunned even veteran commanders, with loader losses particularly high. German 88mm guns could penetrate a Sherman's frontal armor at over 2,000 yards, forcing American crews to close to within 500 yards to have any chance of success. Rose pushed forward regardless. When the German Ardennes offensive began in December 1944, the 3rd Armored was redeployed north to Belgium. During the Battle of the Bulge, Rose's aggressive tactics prevented German forces from reaching the Meuse River. His division destroyed 98 German tanks during 2 weeks of brutal winter combat. American casualties were heavy, but the German advance was halted. In March 1945, the 3rd Armored captured Cologne, and Rose personally led reconnaissance patrols through the ruined city. His aide later noted that the general seemed incapable of remaining behind while his men faced danger. On March 7, American troops raised the flag over Cologne, and Rose was there, standing in the open as German snipers remained active among the rubble. 22 days later, Rose executed perhaps his boldest maneuver. On March 29, he drove the 3rd Armored on a sprint toward Paderborn to help seal the Ruhr pocket. The division covered 90 miles in a single day, a distance no Allied armored unit had ever traversed through enemy territory in one day. It was a record that reflected everything Rose believed about armored warfare: speed, aggression, and unrelenting pressure. That night, German forces regrouped. The 116th Panzer Division moved units into the woods south of Paderborn with orders to halt the American advance. At dawn on March 30, Rose climbed into his jeep at the front of Task Force Wellborn. His aide suggested letting the armored column move first. Rose refused. By 8 o'clock, his small convoy rolled down the narrow forest road, for German tanks lay in wait among the trees. Maurice Rose had been born on November 26, 1899, in Middletown, Connecticut. His father was a rabbi, and his grandfather had served as a rabbi in Poland. The family expected Maurice to follow the same path, but he had other ambitions. In 1916, at 17 years old and still in high school in Denver, Colorado, he walked into a Colorado National Guard recruiting office and lied about his age. The recruiters accepted him. His father was furious, but Rose was determined. He wanted to be a soldier. 1 year later, when the United States entered World War I, Rose completed officer training and shipped to France as a second lieutenant in the 89th Infantry Division. At 18, he was wounded by German artillery at the Battle of St. Mihiel in September 1918. He recovered and returned to combat, earning the rank of captain through battlefield performance by the time the armistice was signed in November. After the war, Rose briefly worked as a salesman, a job he despised. In 1919, he re-enlisted in the army. Peacetime offered slow promotion and low pay, but Rose did not care. He attended every military school available: the Infantry Company Officer Course in 1926, the Cavalry Officer Course in 1931, and the Command and General Staff College in 1937. By 1940, he had graduated from the Army Industrial College. The Army recognized his consistent talent. Rose was promoted to major in 1936. By 1941, now a lieutenant colonel, he took command of the 3rd Battalion, 13th Armored Regiment at Fort Knox, Kentucky. Newspaper reporter Keys Beach described Rose as probably the best-looking man in the Army: tall, dark-haired, with finely chiseled features. But it was Rose's tactical aggressiveness that drew senior commanders' attention. When America entered World War II in December 1941, Rose was assigned executive officer of the 1st Armored Brigade. In early 1942, he became Chief of Staff for the 2nd Armored Division, which deployed to North Africa in November. During the Tunisia campaign, Rose became the first American officer to accept the unconditional surrender of a large German armored unit, negotiating terms personally. His performance earned him promotion to Brigadier General in 1943, and he took command of Combat Command A, 2nd Armored Division. In July, his unit participated in the invasion of Sicily, engaging in brutal fighting over mountainous terrain. German and Italian forces contested every ridge and town, and Rose led from the front, clearing multiple fortified positions through direct assault. In June 1944, Rose landed in Normandy 2 days after D-Day. His combat command fought through the bocage of northern France, where hedgerows turned every field into a killing zone. Tank casualties were severe, but Rose pressed on. On August 7, 1944, the commander of the 3rd Armored Division was relieved amid active combat. The division had stalled. 1st Army needed a commander who would maintain relentless momentum regardless of casualties. Lightning Joe Collins recommended Rose. Rose was promoted to Major General and assumed command of the 3rd Armored Division that day at age 44. The division he inherited had roughly 15,000 men organized into 3 combat commands. Morale was shaky, and tank losses had been significant. Many crews were on their 2nd or 3rd replacement Sherman. Rose called his combat command leaders together immediately, declaring that the 3rd Armored would spearhead 1st Army's advance into Germany. They would be first to cross the border, first through the Siegfried Line. He demanded maximum speed and aggression at all times. Commanders unable to maintain the pace would be relieved. Within 24 hours, the division began moving faster. 5 weeks later, on September 12, 1944, elements of the 3rd Armored crossed into Germany near Rottgen. At 14:30 hours, American tanks rolled into the first German town to fall to Allied forces. Rose rode in the lead vehicle. The Siegfried Line, supposed to be impenetrable, consisted of thousands of reinforced concrete bunkers, pillboxes, steel and concrete dragon's teeth, and interlocking fields of fire from machine gun positions, while minefields covered every approach. The 3rd Armored attacked the fortifications near Rottgen. On September 12, Rose positioned himself at a forward observation post to watch the assault. Sherman tanks fired high explosive rounds at bunker apertures while infantry teams advanced with explosives and flamethrowers. German defenders fought back with 88mm anti-tank guns and Panzer rockets. By nightfall on September 12, American forces had breached the outer line of fortifications. The Siegfried Line had been penetrated for the first time. News of the breakthrough reached Allied headquarters within hours. Eisenhower sent congratulations. The psychological impact was immediate. Hitler's impenetrable West Wall had fallen in less than 1 day, but breaking through was different from breaking out. German forces established new defensive positions every few miles. The terrain east of the Siegfried Line favored defenders. Rolling hills, dense forests, small villages with stone buildings that became fortresses. Rose kept pushing his division forward. Progress was measured in hundreds of yards per day instead of miles. Tank losses mounted steadily. By late September, the 3rd Armored had lost more than 40 medium tanks. Replacement Shermans arrived from depots in France, but replacement crews took weeks to reach combat effectiveness. Veteran tankers knew the patterns. German tanks spotted American armor fired first. The Van Macke's Panther and Tiger tanks had better optics, longer range guns, and thicker armor. American tank crews developed their own tactics. They learned to use terrain for cover to advance in groups where multiple Shermans could engage a single German tank, to call for artillery support before entering open ground. Rose encouraged innovation. He told his tank commanders to find solutions or die trying. The autumn weather deteriorated in October. Rain turned dirt roads into mud. Visibility dropped. Air support became unreliable. German resistance stiffened as American supply lines stretched longer. By mid-October, the 3rd Armored Division had advanced to within 20 miles of the Rhine River near Cologne. Then the offensive stalled. Ammunition shortages forced a temporary halt. Artillery units were rationed to specific numbers of shells per day. Tank units couldn't advance without artillery support. Rose protested to Corps headquarters. Collins told him to wait. Every division alone The front faced the same problem. Supply trucks couldn't keep pace with the advance across France. The division spent late October and November fighting defensive battles around the town of Stahlberg. German counterattacks came almost daily. Local commanders knew Rose's aggressive reputation. They targeted his forward positions with concentrated artillery barges followed by infantry assaults. American casualties increased. Rose established his command post in a damaged building less than 2 miles from the front line. Incoming German artillery fire hit the area multiple times per day. His staff begged him to move further back. Rose refused. He said he needed to see the battlefield to make proper decisions. His presence near the front became legendary among the division's enlisted men. Stories spread about the general who wouldn't hide in the rear. On December 16, 1944, German forces launched a massive surprise offensive in the Ardennes. 3 German armies attacked through Belgium with the goal of reaching Antwerp and splitting Allied forces. The offensive caught American units completely by surprise. Entire regiments were surrounded and forced to surrender. The 3rd Armored Division received orders to move north. Immediately, Rose pulled his units out of their positions near Stahlberg and drove toward Belgium. The weather was brutal. Snow and freezing temperatures. Roads were iced over. Visibility was near zero. The division drove through the night. By December 19, elements of the 3rd Armored had reached defensive positions near Huels, Belgium. German armored spearheads were attempting to bypass American strongpoints and reach the Meuse River. Rose positioned his tanks across the roads leading west. He told his commanders they would hold regardless of what the Germans threw at them. The German offensive in the Ardennes involved over 200,000 troops and nearly 600 tanks. 3 entire armies attacking on a 60 front. The goal was to punch through weak American defenses, cross the Meuse River, and capture Antwerp. If successful, the offensive would split British and American forces and potentially force a negotiated peace. The 3rd Armored Division stood directly in the path of the German advance. Rose deployed his tanks in defensive positions along key road junctions near Huels. German armor would have to come through his sector to reach the Meuse. He had roughly 200 operational Sherman tanks. Intelligence reports indicated at least 4 German panzer divisions were moving toward his positions. The first German attacks came on December 20, Panther and Tiger. Tanks supported by Panzer Grenadier Infantry attempted to break through American lines south of Huels. Rose's tank crews engaged at maximum range. The fighting lasted throughout the day. By nightfall, the 3rd Armored had knocked out 17 German tanks. American losses were 12 Shermans destroyed and 6 damaged. German forces probed for weak points over the next 3 days. Rose moved his reserves to threaten sectors personally. He rode forward to observe German movements and adjust his defensive positions. On December 23, the weather cleared enough for American fighter bombers to attack German armor. The combination of air support and Dugin tanks stopped the German advance in the 3rd Armored Sector. By Christmas Day, the German offensive had stalled. They had failed to reach the Meuse River. American reinforcements were arriving daily. Patton's 3rd Army was attacking the southern flank of the German salient. The 3rd Armored Division had held its positions despite being outnumbered nearly 3-1 in armor. The cost had been significant. The division reported 98 German tanks destroyed during 2 weeks of fighting. American tank losses totaled 41 Shermans completely destroyed and another 33 damaged. Infantry casualties exceeded 500 men killed, wounded, or missing. But the line had held. In January 1945, American forces began counterattacking to reduce the German bulge. Rose's division participated in offensive operations to push German forces back to their starting positions. The fighting was brutal. Winter conditions made movement difficult. Frozen ground prevented digging proper foxholes. Frostbite casualties mounted as quickly as combat casualties. By late January,
the German salient had been eliminated.
American forces were back to the positions they had held in mid-December. The Battle of the Bulge was over. Germany had lost roughly 100,000 men and
600 tanks in the offensive. Men and equipment they could not replace.
The Wehrmacht would never again launch a
major offensive on the Western Front.
The 3rd Armored Division was pulled back to Stolberg for rest and refitting.
Replacement tanks arrived. Replacement crews needed training. Rose gave the division 2 weeks to absorb replacements and prepare equipment.
In early February, 1st Army planned a new offensive to cross the Rohr River and
drive toward the Rhine.
On February 23, the 3rd Armored attacked across the
Rohr near Duran. German resistance was lighter than expected. Many Wehrmacht units had been decimated during the Ardennes offensive.
The division advanced rapidly. Within 3 days, they had penetrated 15 miles beyond the river.
Rose pushed his lead elements toward Cologne.
The city was Germany's 4th largest and a major industrial center.
Capturing Cologne would give the Allies a major propaganda victory and provide a crossing point over the Rhine River. German commanders recognized the city's importance.
They poured reinforcements into the defensive positions around Cologne.
The battle for Cologne began on March 2.
American forces attacked from the west and south. The 3rd Armored Division led the assault from the southern approaches.
German defenders used the ruins of bombed buildings as fortified positions. Every street became a battlefield. Tank support was essential but dangerous. German infantry armed with Panzerfasts hid in basements and upper floors. Rose established his command post in a captured German bunker less than 1 mile from active fighting. Artillery fire and small arms fire could be heard constantly. His staff reported that the general personally visited 4
positions multiple times per day to observe German defensive tactics and adjust American assault plans.
The fighting continued for 5 days, block by block, building by building. On March 6, German resistance began collapsing. On March 7, 1945, American troops entered the center of Cologne.
German forces withdrew across the Rhine River and destroyed the Honau Bridge behind them. The 3rd Armored Division reached the western bank of the Rhine that afternoon.
Rose was among the first
senior officers to reach the river.
Cologne was in ruins.
Allied bombing raids over 3 years had destroyed roughly
85% of the city. The massive Gothic cathedral still stood, its twin spires dominating the shattered skyline. Dead German soldiers lay in the streets. Destroyed vehicles blocked intersections. The smell of death hung over everything. Rose walked through the captured city that evening. His aides stayed close. Snipers were still active in some buildings.
The general seemed oblivious to the danger. He wanted to see what his division had accomplished.
The capture of Cologne represented the first major German city to fall to Allied forces. 1st Army headquarters sent congratulations.
Eisenhower mentioned the 3rd Armored's achievement in his daily briefing, but Rose had no time to
celebrate. Intelligence reports indicated German forces were regrouping east of the Rhine. The Ruhr industrial region held Germany's remaining war production capacity.
Steel mills, coal mines, munitions factories.
Taking the Ruhr would Germany's ability to continue the war.
Allied strategy called for encircling the Ruhr rather than
attacking it directly.
1st Army would cross the Rhine north of the Ruhr and drive east.
Patton's 3rd Army would cross south of the region and drive northeast. The two forces would link up east of the Ruhr, trapping all German forces inside the pocket.
The 3rd Armored Division would spearhead 1st Army's drive. Rose received his orders.
On March 24, the division would cross the Rhine, advance rapidly to Paderborn, and seal the northern edge of the encirclement. Speed was essential. German forces needed to be trapped
before they could withdraw or reinforce.
On March 25, Rose met with his combat command leaders. Lightning Joe Collins and Major General Pete Cassada were present. They discussed other units' recent advances. Collins mentioned that some divisions had covered impressive distances. Cassada added that air Support was ready to assist rapid movement.
Rose stated that the 3rd Armored Division would be in Paderborn within 24 hours. Paderborn was nearly 100 miles from their current position near Marburg. His staff looked at the maps. 100 miles through enemy territory in one day had never been done by an
Allied Armored Division.
Rose said it would be done tomorrow.
On March 29 at
dawn, the 3rd Armored Division began moving. Rose positioned himself near the front of the column.
3 Combat commands advanced on parallel routes toward Paderborn. German resistance was scattered. Many Wehrmacht units were withdrawing east to avoid encirclement.
The few German forces that attempted to fight were bypassed or quickly destroyed. The division drove through multiple towns without stopping.
Reconnaissance elements reported roads ahead were clear.
Tank columns maintained speeds of 20 to 30 miles per hour when terrain allowed.
Infantry rode on the tanks to keep pace. Artillery units struggled to keep up with the armored spearheads. By noon, the division had covered 40 miles.
Rose urged his commanders to maintain speed. German forces were
disorganized. This was the moment to exploit confusion and drive deep into enemy territory. Radio reports indicated minimal resistance ahead. By late afternoon, lead elements of the 3rd Armored were approaching the outskirts of Paderborn.
The division had covered more than 90 m since dawn.
It was the longest single-day advance through enemy territory by any Allied division during the entire war.
Rose's aggressive leadership and willingness to take risks had achieved something unprecedented, but German commanders were not finished. Elements of the 116th Panzer Division had been ordered to stop the American advance at Paderborn.
The unit
included veteran crews and several heavy tanks. They positioned themselves along the roads south of the city during the
night of March 29.
At 0600 on March 30, Rose prepared to continue the advance. His staff recommended letting armored reconnaissance elements move first to scout for enemy positions. Rose refused. He wanted to see the situation personally. At 0700, he climbed into his Jeep at the head of Task Force Wellborn. The convoy consisted of 5 vehicles. A Sherman tank in the lead, a Jeep carrying reconnaissance personnel directly behind the tank, Rose's Jeep, third in line, an armored car fourth, a motorcycle messenger at the rear. Total personnel in the convoy numbered approximately 15 men. Rose sat in the front passenger seat of his Jeep. His driver was Technical Sergeant T.J. Shawn. Major Robert Bellinger, Rose's aide, sat in the back. The Jeep carried no heavy weapons beyond the personal sidearms and Thompson submachine guns carried by the 3 men. The convoy moved south on a narrow forest road toward Kirchboren. Intelligence reports indicated German forces had been active in the area overnight, but exact positions were unknown. Rose wanted to locate units of Task Force Wellborn that had been cut off by German armor during the previous evening's advance. At approximately 0800 hours, the convoy began taking small arms fire from the woods. The lead Sherman immediately stopped. Rose and his staff jumped from their Jeep into a roadside ditch. The Thompson submachine guns were useless at the range the German infantry was firing from. Within seconds, the lead Sherman took a direct hit from a German anti-tank gun. The round penetrated the turret. The tank caught fire. Crew members who could escape scrambled out and ran for cover. 3 crewmen died inside the burning vehicle. German tank engines could be heard moving through the forest on both sides of the road. Rose and his staff realized they were being surrounded. They ran back to their Jeep. Shaw started the engine immediately. The small convoy turned off the road and drove across an open field attempting to escape the ambush. The field was rough terrain. The Jeep bounced violently over frozen ground. They drove several hundred yards before turning back toward the main road. Rose needed to reach American lines and reorganize a response to the German armor that had infiltrated behind Task Force Wellborn's advance. When the convoy reached the road, Rose saw German tanks, multiple vehicles, heavy armor. The lead reconnaissance Jeep accelerated hard and managed to speed past the German position. The driver floored the accelerator and escaped down the road toward American lines.
Shanti attempted the same maneuver. He gunned the engine and aimed the jeep past the closest German tank, but the tank commander saw them coming. The Tiger tank swung its hull to block the narrow road. The tank's mass cut off the escape route completely. Shantoni braked. The jeep stopped 15 feet from the German tank. The Tiger's turret was traversed to face away from them, but the hull blocked any path forward. Trees lined both sides of the road. There was no room to maneuver around the massive vehicle. The Tiger's top hatch opened. A German tank commander emerged from the turret. He carried a machine pistol, likely an MP40 or similar weapon. He pointed the weapon at the jeep and began shouting in German. Rose, Bellinger, and Shanti exited the jeep with their hands raised. Standard surrender protocol. The three men stood in front of the Tiger tank with their arms in the air. Rose was wearing his general's insignia, 2 stars clearly visible on his helmet and uniform. The German tank commander was approximately 10 feet away. The time was approximately 8:15. Daylight, but the forest created shadows on the road. The German was still shouting. Rose was the highest ranking officer. He would conduct the surrender. His pistol was holstered on his right hip. Army protocol required surrendering officers to remove their sidearm and place it on the ground. Rose lowered his right hand toward his holster. The movement was slow, deliberate. He was reaching to unbuckle the holster and remove his weapon to surrender it. The German tank commander opened fire. The MP40 fired in short bursts, 9mm rounds. At least 14 shots were fired in rapid succession. Multiple rounds struck Rose in the head and torso. He fell immediately, dead before he hit the ground. Bellinger and Schantz ran. The German did not pursue them. They reached American lines 30 minutes later and reported what had happened. American forces recovered Rose's body the following day on March 31st. A patrol from the 3rd Armored Division reached the site where he had been killed. The German tank crew had withdrawn during the night. Rose's body lay beside the road near a plum tree. 14 bullet wounds, most to the head and upper torso. News of Rose's death reached 1st Army headquarters within hours. Lightning Joe Collins was shocked. He had warned Rose repeatedly about leading from the front. Rose had ignored every warning. Now the 3rd Armored Division had lost its commander at the moment of its greatest achievement. The division's officers were devastated. Brigadier General Doyle Hickey immediately assumed temporary command. The advance toward Paderborn could not stop. German forces were still attempting to escape the developing encirclement. Hickey ordered all units to continue attacking. Task Force X, now commanded by Lieutenant Colonel John B.S. Jr., cleared the roadblock where Rose had died. American tanks destroyed the German armor that had ambushed the convoy. By late afternoon on March 31st, elements of the 3rd Armored entered Paderborn. The city fell after heavy fighting. On April 1st, American forces completed the encirclement of the RER. The 3rd Armored Division linked up with elements of the 9th Army east of the industrial region. Over 376,000 German soldiers were trapped inside the pocket. It was the largest encirclement of enemy forces in the Western Theater. 1st Army Headquarters announced that the pocket would be renamed the Rose Pocket in honor of the fallen general. The announcement was made on April 2nd. Every soldier in the 3rd Armored Division knew their commander's final operation had achieved exactly what he had promised. Paderborn in 24 hours. The ruler sealed. Military investigators began examining the circumstances of Rose's death immediately. The U.S. Army wanted to determine if the killing constituted a war crime. Eyewitness accounts from Bellinger and Shane indicated Rose had raised his hands in surrender before being shot. The question was whether the German tank commander had deliberately executed a surrendering officer. Colonel Leon Jorsky led the investigation. He would later serve as special prosecutor during the Watergate scandal. Jorsky interviewed multiple witnesses. He examined the scene where Rose died. He interrogated captured German soldiers from the 116th Panzer Division. The investigation found conflicting evidence. Bellinger stated that Rose was clearly surrendering when shot. He had his hands raised. He was reaching to remove his weapon to place it on the ground. The German tank commander should have recognized the surrender, but captured German soldiers told a different story. They claimed the
Encounter happened in poor light under trees. The tank commander saw an American officer reaching toward his holster. In the chaos of combat, the German interpreted the movement as reaching for a weapon to fight. He fired.
In self-defense,
Jorsky examined the physical evidence. The forest created
shadows even during daylight.
Rose was wearing a general's stars, but the German tank commander may not have seen them.
Clearly, the timeline indicated the entire encounter lasted less than 30 seconds from the Jeep stopping to the shooting.
The investigation concluded that Rose's death was killed in action.
Rather than a war crime, the evidence suggested a tragic misunderstanding.
Rather than deliberate execution,
no charges were filed against the German tank commander.
The case was closed in
June 1945.
Rose was buried at the Netherlands American Cemetery in Margaret on April
3, 1945.
Over 2,000 soldiers from the 3rd Armored Division attended the
funeral. The cemetery staff placed a Star of David above his grave, recognizing his Jewish heritage. His family later requested a cross, citing Rose's official religious preference listed as Protestant.
The 3rd Armored
Division continued fighting after Rose's death.
They discovered the Dora Mittelbau concentration camp near
Nordhausen on April 11.
Over 1,000 dead prisoners were found at the site. Hundreds more were barely alive. Medical teams worked to save survivors.
The division's final major combat occurred at Dessau on April 23. After 3 days of fighting, the city fell. Germany surrendered on May 8, 1945. The war in
Europe was over.
Maurice Rose was the highest-ranking American officer killed by enemy fire in the European theater. He was 45 years old. He had served 28 years in the Army.
The 3rd Armored Division compiled its final statistics for World War II in May 1945.
Total battle casualties numbered 9,243 men. That figure included all personnel
killed, wounded, missing, or captured. 2,147 men died in combat. 100 soldiers remained listed as missing in action. The division's achievements under Rose's command were unprecedented: the first American armored unit to enter Germany, the first to breach the Siegfried Line, the first to capture a major German city, and the longest single-day advance through enemy territory.
These records stood as a testament to Rose's aggressive leadership philosophy.
His decorations reflected 28 years of military service: Distinguished Service Cross for Extraordinary Heroism in September 1944, Distinguished Service Medal, 2 Silver Stars, 2 Legions of Merit, 2 Purple Hearts, 2 Bronze Stars, French Legion of Honor, French Croix de Guerre, and Belgian Croix de Guerre. Rose had been recommended for the Medal of Honor 3 times during World War II, but each recommendation was downgraded to lesser awards. Reasons varied. Some senior officers considered his aggressive tactics reckless rather than heroic. Others viewed leading from the front as foolish rather than courageous.
Rose never received the nation's highest military decoration.
Yet the men who served under him understood his accomplishments.
Tank crews who survived the war credited Rose's leadership with giving them the best chance of victory.
His insistence on speed and aggression meant American forces spent less time exposed to German fire. His willingness to lead from the front meant he fully understood the dangers his men faced. After the war, the Army honored him by naming multiple installations after him. Rose Barracks in Vilseck, Germany, became home to American armored units. Maurice Rose Army Airfield opened near Frankfurt. Rose Hall and Rose Terrace at Fort Knox, Kentucky, commemorated his service in training armored forces. The Jewish community, which had been raising funds for a new hospital when news of Rose's death arrived, renamed the planned facility the General Maurice Rose Memorial Hospital. The hospital opened in 1948 and later became Rose Medical Center, which remains operational today. The United States Army commissioned a transport ship named USAT General Maurice Rose, which served from 1946 until 1975. A primary school in Margaretha, Netherlands, was also named for Rose, reflecting the gratitude of the Dutch people for American sacrifices during liberation. In 2021, Colorado approved construction of a bronze statue honoring Rose. The 10-foot monument depicts him leading his troops, with the words "Follow me" inscribed on the base.
It was dedicated on April 16, 2022, in Denver. Military historians have debated Maurice Rose's legacy for decades.
Some contend that his aggressive tactics led to unnecessary casualties, pointing to the 3rd Armored Division's high losses compared with other units. Others argue that his approach shortened the war and ultimately saved lives by sustaining relentless pressure on German forces. Yet the discussion often overlooks a key truth. Rose believed that armored warfare demanded speed, aggression, and personal leadership, and he embodied every element of that belief. He never asked his men to assume risks he would not take himself.
He died performing the same principle he had practiced throughout his career, leading from the front.
His death on March 30, 1945, was not a heroic flourish, it was tragic, a brief misjudgment in poor light among the trees. In 30 seconds, the life of the U.S. Army's most daring armored commander was ended, yet his years of service before that instant define courage, commitment, and devotion to mission above all else. If this story resonated with you as it did with us, do a small favor, hit the like button. Every like signals to YouTube that this story deserves to reach more people. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the forgotten accounts we uncover from dusty archives every day, stories of generals, tank commanders, and frontline leaders who acted with courage and resolve. Real people, real heroism. Share where you're watching from: United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, anywhere in the world. Our community stretches across continents. You're not just a viewer, you're helping keep these memories alive. Tell us your location, share if a family member served, just let us know you're here.
Thank you for watching, and thank you for ensuring Maurice Rose's story does not fade into silence.
These men deserve remembrance, and you are helping make that happen.